Before we even get to humans, you need to understand what kind of planet our earliest ancestors were born into. We're talking about a world that had already survived multiple mass extinctions, ice ages, and atmospheric collapses by the time something resembling a human ancestor showed up around 6 to 7 million years ago. Earth had already been running its brutal elimination tournament for billions of years. The climate alone was a nightmare. Temperatures swung wildly. Forests would vanish and turn to grasslands in geologically short periods of time. The animals sharing the landscape with early hominins weren't friendly. Giant hyenas, saber-toothed cats, and massive, short-faced bears were all very much in play. And our ancestors? Physically, they were nothing special. No speed, no strength, no natural weapons. They had big brains developing slowly over millions of years. And that was basically the whole plan. Sounds terrifying, right? Because it was. But here's the thing, that giant brain was apparently enough. Barely. And the real tests hadn't even started yet. About 74,000 years ago, a supervolcano sitting under what is now Lake Toba in Sumatra erupted. And when I say erupted, I don't mean in the dramatic movie sense. I mean in the this is one of the largest volcanic events in the last 25 million years sense. The eruption dumped somewhere between 2,500 and 3,000 cubic kilometers of ash into the atmosphere. To put that in perspective, the Mount St. Helens eruption in 1980 released about 1 cubic kilometer. Toba was 2,500 times bigger. The ash cloud blanketed the globe. Sunlight was blocked. Temperatures dropped by an estimated 3 to 5 degrees Celsius. Globally, and in some regions it was even worse. Crops, or rather the wild plants and animals our ancestors depended on, collapsed. A volcanic winter set in that may have lasted years. And this is where that terrifying population number comes in. Genetic evidence strongly suggests the human population crashed to just a few thousand individuals during or shortly after this event. We were one bad season away from total extinction. Some researchers call this a bottleneck, a brutal genetic squeeze where almost everyone dies, and only a handful survive to carry the species forward. Those survivors, that's literally where your DNA comes from. Toba wasn't even the only catastrophe early humans had to deal with. Let's talk about the ice ages, because there wasn't just one, there were multiple glacial cycles. And humans lived through several of them. The most recent major glacial period peaked around 20,000 years ago. And at that point, massive ice sheets covered North America, all the way down to where New York City sits today. Europe was largely frozen. Sea levels were about 120 meters lower than they are now, meaning entire land masses that are underwater today were walkable. Britain wasn't an island. Indonesia's islands were connected. The world map literally looked different. And in this frozen world, our ancestors didn't just survive, they actually expanded. Homo sapiens crossed into the Americas around 15,000 to 20,000 years ago, probably by walking across a land bridge where the Bering Sea now sits. They reached Australia roughly 50,000 years ago, crossing open ocean with primitive watercraft. They hunted woolly mammoths, woolly rhinos, and cave lions in temperatures that would freeze exposed skin in minutes. They figured out fire management, constructed shelters from mammoth bones, and created art, actual cave paintings, while simultaneously trying not to starve or freeze. The Lascaux cave paintings in France are about 17,000 years old. Your ancestors were painting animals on cave walls in the middle of an ice age. Wrap your head around that? But even as ice ages ended, the next threat was already forming. And it came from somewhere no one expected. Here's something that doesn't get talked about nearly enough. After the last ice age ended, and things started warming up around 12,000 years ago, you might assume it was smooth sailing. But no. What followed were catastrophic, mega droughts that repeatedly threatened human populations in Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. The Green Sahara, yes, the Sahara was actually green and habitable, roughly 9,000 to 5,000 years ago, collapsed into desert again when monsoon patterns shifted. Entire lakes dried up. The civilizations built around them were forced to move or collapse entirely. Archaeologists have found evidence of thriving communities in regions that are now bone-dry wasteland. In the Arabian Peninsula, ancient river systems that haven't flowed in thousands of years are visible from satellite imagery, complete with the ruins of settlements along their banks. These weren't primitive people, they had tools, trade networks, and social structures. And the drought erased them. The ones who survived did so by migrating toward the Nile, the Tigris, The Euphrates, the rivers that still had water. And that migration is part of what gave rise to early civilizations in Mesopotamia and Egypt. In other words, a catastrophic drought may have directly caused the birth of recorded human history. Funny how that works. Here's a question worth sitting with. What does surviving all of this actually do to a species? The answer is stranger than you'd think. Each bottleneck, each near-extinction event, reshaped human genetics in permanent ways. The Toba bottleneck, for example, likely eliminated enormous amounts of genetic diversity from our species, which is why, genetically speaking, all 8 billion humans alive today are remarkably similar. We are one of the least genetically diverse large mammals on the planet. Cheetahs are famously inbred, but even they show more genetic variation than humans, due in certain measurements. That's how close we came to the edge. But survival also gave us gifts. Those brutal generations of selection pressure, cold, drought, famine, predators honed specific traits that proved invaluable. Increased capacity for long-distance running, fat storage efficiency that allowed survival through famine periods, an immune system that could rapidly adapt, the ability to digest a remarkably wide variety of foods, and perhaps most crucially, an unprecedented level of social cooperation. Humans who worked together, shared food, communicated complex ideas, and cared for vulnerable group members survived. The loners, statistically, did not. Every instinct you have toward community and belonging, that's not weakness. That's the survival strategy that beat every era on this list. And yet the most dangerous era in human history might not be in the past at all. Think about everything your ancestors survived. Supervolcano winters, ice ages, mega droughts, megafauna predators. And they survived it all without technology, without medicine, without even a basic understanding of what was happening to them. They just adapted, moved, figured it out. And here you are, sitting proof that the strategy worked. Every generation before you, going back hundreds of thousands of years, made it. All of them. No exceptions, because if even one link in that chain had broken, you wouldn't be here. That's not just a cool historical fact. It's actually a pretty insane thing to think about on a Tuesday afternoon. So here's what I want you to do. Drop a comment below. Which era do you think you would have survived? Be honest. The Ice Age? The volcanic winter? The mega drought? Let's see how delusional we all are together. And if this kind of forgotten, no BS history is your thing, hit subscribe. Because yesterday's secret is where the stories that actually shaped your world finally get told.